Unlike their Aryan kinsfolk, the Greeks, the Teutons were not a literary people. Their mythical tales were preserved not in books, but in memory. And Christianity, as represented alike by the missionaries and by Charlemagne himself, did its best to destroy Teutonic paganism root and branch. Hence it happens that of the myths of the gods and heroes of those great nations who, in pre-Christian times, inhabited the territories now included under the general name Germany, no complete and systematic account has been transmitted to modern times. But the old Germans were of the same race with the people of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. Their speech was essentially the same. They had the same social and domestic customs, and the same religion. Further, during the time when Christianity was spreading over Germany and Scandinavia, that exodus of the Norsemen was likewise taking place, which ended in the colonization of Iceland, or Snowland, as it was also named by its discoverers in the middle of the 9th century. There, on the verge, as Dr. Darcent says, of the polar circle, the Vikings established their little independent principalities or republics, unmeddled with by Christian priests, and disdaining the continental kings who were aping the customs of the new times. The Icelandic Norsemen preserved, for 5 centuries more, the pure faith of their forefathers. Lastly, there appears to have been less antagonism, less friction, between the two rival religions, Odinism and Christianity, in Iceland than in other countries. Its Christian priests would seem to have felt the loyalty of children towards their old faith, then dying away. Hence, in a measure, the complete and systematic form in which the Icelanders were able to leave a permanent record of their mythology. It was a Christian priest, Sigmund Sigfusson, who, in the middle of the 11th century, composed the compilation of mythical poems known as the Elder Edda. To the succeeding century belongs the Younger Edda, which is merely a prose rendering of those portions of the first work which narrate the creation of the world and man, and the generation, adventures, functions, and ultimate fate of the gods. As a cosmogony and theogony, this Edda, or, as the word might be paraphrased, Tales of a Grandmother, is as complete even as its Greek prototype, the Theogony of Hesiod. And as a record and expression of the spiritual life of those Teutons, who also were the progenitors of our English race, it is, or surely ought to be, incomparably more interesting. The Creation. In the prose Edda, Gengki, the wise king, travels in search of knowledge to the home of the Asa folk, the Norse gods, each of whom supplies the visitor with some piece of special information. The cosmogonic history thus patched up between them closely corresponds in main points with that contained in the Hesiodic poem, while its special details, tone, and coloring are the expression of special climatic conditions. Where the earth now is, there was in the beginning, says the Edda, no sand, sea, or grass, but only an empty space, Ginnunga Gap, on whose north side lay the region of mist, ice, and snow, Niflheim, and on its south side the region of warmth and sunlight, Muspelheim. The warm breaths from the sunland caused the ice to melt, and topple over into Ginnunga Gap, and from the matter so accumulated sprang the huge Ymir, ancestor of the Riimthursson, rime, or frost, giants. Ymir fed on the milk of the cow or dumbler, whose name, it may be observed, in the Zendavesta, stands indifferently for cow or Mother Earth. The cow herself lived by licking the ice blocks, from which, in consequence of the licking, was produced Bori, who is alike the fashioner of the world, and the father of Bor, who was the father of Odin. Odin's brothers were Willi and Wee, and just as in Hesiod the deities Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades supplant Cronus, so the sons of Bori overthrow and succeed the primitive dynasty of Ymir and the frost giants. Also, the dead Ymir is turned to a sea count similarly with the dead Cronus. His flesh becomes earth, his blood, the sea, his bones, the mountains, his teeth, cliffs and crags, his skull, the heavens, wherein his brains float in the form of clouds. The heavens are supported by 4 dwarves, Osteri, east, Westeri, west, Nordri, north, and Sudri, south, and the stars in it are the sparks from the fireland of Muspelheim. The new world thus fashioned was called Midgard, as being placed midway between the lands of frost and fire. To preserve it and its inhabitants from the giants, who dwelt in Jotunheim, Odin and his brother surrounded it with a fence made from the eyebrows of Ymir. The inhabitants themselves were said to have been produced from 2 pieces of wood which the brothers found floating on the sea, and changed into a man, whom they named Ash, and a woman, whom they named Ernbla. From this middle world, or Midgard, arose the Norse Olympus, or Asgard, whereon dwelt the Aesir folk, Odin and the 12 Aesir. It contained 2 mansions, Gladsheim for the gods, and Vingolf for the goddesses. There also was Valhalla, wherein Odin placed 1/2 of the heroes slain in battle, the other half being received by Freyja, the wife of Odin. Besides those already named there were, as the Edda says, other homesteads, such as Elfheim, where the elves dwelt, Breidablik, where dwelt the bright and beautiful, far-seeing Balder, Himinbi-Org, or the heaven tower of the thunder god Thor, and Valaskiarf, whence Odin could watch all gods and men. The gods also met in daily council beneath the branches of the tree Yggdrasil, one of whose roots grew in Asgard, the second in Niflheim, and the third in the realm of Hela, or Death, and their way thither lay over the bright Aesir bridge, or Bifrost, or Rainbow, which was said to burn all a fire, so as to keep away the frost giants of Jotunheim. Lastly, the lower world was ruled by the goddess Hel, and to it were consigned those who had not died in battle. It was so far away that Odin's swift horse Sleipnir took 9 nights to reach it. The river Gil, the Norse Styx, surrounded this lower world on every side. Nastrand was the name of the worst spot in the Norse hell. Its roofs and doors were wattled with hissing snakes,